Both Azure OpenAI Service and the OpenAI API serve nearly the same models. GPT-4o, the O-series reasoning models, and the embeddings models. So why does picking the wrong front door cost teams months of rework? In the next few minutes, we'll dissect a real reference architecture for an enterprise retrieval augmented chatbot. See exactly where each service plugs in, how requests and data flow through it, the failure modes you'll hit, and the trade-offs an architect actually weighs. By the end, you'll have a clear rule of thumb for which one to reach for. Start with what actually differs. The OpenAI API gives you the newest models first, often weeks ahead, with the simplest onboarding, just an API key. Azure OpenAI lags slightly on model availability, but wraps the same models in enterprise plumbing, Microsoft Entra ID authentication, private networking, regional data residency, and a contractual commitment that your prompts aren't used to train models. Both make that data commitment now, but Azure's lives under your existing Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. If you're already an Azure shop with compliance requirements, that integration is the deciding factor more often than raw model freshness. Here's the design we're dissecting. An internal knowledge base assistant. A client calls Azure API Management, which handles throttling and auth. That forwards to an Azure Container App running the orchestration logic. The app embeds the user's question, queries Azure AI search for relevant document chunks, then calls Azure OpenAI with the question plus retrieved context, secrets, and the deployment endpoint live in Key Vault. Notice every hop stays inside the Azure trust boundary. That's the whole point of choosing Azure OpenAI here rather than the public endpoint. Look closer at authentication, because this is where Azure earns its place. With the OpenAI API, you hold a long-lived secret key. In this architecture, the container app instead uses a managed identity to get an Entra ID token for Azure OpenAI. There's no key to rotate, no key to leak, and access is governed by role-based access control. You grant the identity, the cognitive services OpenAI user role, and nothing more. For a regulated workload, eliminating standing secrets is often worth more than getting a new model 2 weeks early. Now the operational reality. On Azure, you don't call a model directly. You create a named deployment of a model in a specific region, and your quota is measured in tokens per minute assigned to that deployment. The OpenAI, by contrast, gives you account-level rate limits across organizations. This matters for capacity planning. For predictable enterprise load, Azure offers provisioned throughput units, PTUs, that reserve dedicated capacity instead of sharing the pay-as-you-go pool. Quota numbers and PTU pricing change frequently, so check the current Azure docs before you size anything. Every architect should map the failure modes. First, regional model availability. The model you want may not exist in your required region, forcing a multi-region or fallback design. Second, throttling. When you exceed tokens per minute, you get 429 responses. So your orchestrator needs retry with exponential backoff and ideally a second deployment to failover to. Third, content filtering. Azure applies its own configurable content filters that can block or flag responses the raw OpenAI API would return. So test your prompts against them early. Each of these is a design decision, not an afterthought. So here's the rule of thumb. Reach for Azure OpenAI when you need enterprise identity, private networking, data residency, contractual data handling, or you're already invested in Azure. Exactly the constraints in our reference architecture. Reach for the OpenAI API when you want the newest models the day they ship, the simplest possible setup, or you're prototyping and don't yet have compliance constraints. Plenty of teams prototype on the OpenAI API and migrate to Azure for production. The SDKs are close enough that it's mostly a config change. To recap, both serve the same core models, but Azure OpenAI wraps them in identity, networking, residency, and quota controls, while the OpenAI API trades that for speed and simplicity. We saw how Azure slots cleanly into an Entra-secured retrieval architecture and the failure modes you must design around. Your concrete next step. List your actual non-functional requirements, compliance, networking, and which exact model and region you need. Then check the Azure region and model availability table in the current docs before committing. Let the requirements pick the door, not the hype. If this helped, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. See you in the next video.